All right, everybody. While watching King of the Hill, I got this crazy idea to actually create birth charts for fictional characters and analyze them, which you could actually use. I hope to get people on in the future to do. But while watching King of the Hill, I saw that Hank Hill actually saw his birth certificate and found out he was born in New York City and had a little meltdown there. Time was given at 3:07 a.m. Born in New York City. So Hank Hill was born April 19th, 1953 at 3:07 a.m. at New York City, according to the show. So let's take a look at his chart and see how accurate that actually is for Hank Hill. And if you don't know who Hank Hill is, he's a character from a Fox TV show, a cartoon made by Mike Judge, who created Beavis and Butthead, called King of the Hill. And it's funny, he's autistic, but he's also like an ESTJ, or he does have a lot of autistic traits. So we'll see how that manifests here in this chart. So I'm gonna go around. So they have him born in October, or they have him born at April 19th. So he's on the Aries Taurus cusp, which is interesting, and it's in the second house. So of course the sun is the leadership, how you assert yourself, how you kind of shine in this world, your ego, and the ultimate culmination of kind of what you need to become. It's teetering right here on Aries and Taurus in the second house. So the second house is about finances, resources, your self worth, things you find beauty in, things of that nature. When his sun is there, and he's an Aries and kind of a blend of a Taurus, but his sun is technically in Aries. So Aries is a hot-headed energy. It's about asserting yourself and moving forward. It's ruled by Mars, so it's about conflict, fighting, war, things like that. I know he wanted to go into the military, but he couldn't because of his narrow urethra. But he does have a lot of Taurus characteristics too. He's usually calm. He's very fixed. He has a lot of fixed energy. He's very, like I said, he has autistic traits, so he's very rigid and he likes things to be traditional and he likes the things that make him comfortable. So he's like a SI parent there. But yeah, but he does have a temper when things don't go his way or things don't fall in this nice little box where he likes to categorize things. He gets pretty hot. So maybe there is some accuracy to this sun, and it is making this opposition here over here to Saturn, which is conjunct Neptune. So he's not very spiritually inclined. It's interesting. He's very rigid. Of course, he's Christian and believes in God or Lutheran or whatever he is in the show, but any outside possibilities that Neptune will bring, and it is retrograde. It's interesting. He's spiritually dense in a way. So there's no real possibilities. I know there's one episode where Bobby became a tarot reader. He got a tarot deck and he started hanging out with these weird guys that were doing magic and stuff. But Saturn there making a conjunction to Neptune, and it's kind of just teetered over in the eighth house, and it is in Libra. So yeah, like he's really uncomfortable with sex and intimacy. So Saturn being there would block that as well. So that's interesting. All right, let's go in order here. Let's go look at his moon. What's going on with his moon, which is conjunct Uranus, which that actually sounds pretty autistic. But it's in the fifth house, which is about joy, romance, flings, hobbies, things like that. He loves his propane. But I think this making a conjunction to Uranus would make it very spontaneous. He would probably have a lot of different interests and a lot of interests that aren't status quo. He likes sports, football, fishing, golf, things of that nature. So it's kind of like the stereotypical redneck male sitting in a alley drinking beer with his friends. But yeah, so something weird and something Uranian and Aquarian wouldn't make him very happy. That would make him the opposite as far as Hank goes. It is making an opposition there to his Chiron, which we'll get to in a little bit. But it is in the fifth house, which is about romance, flings, joys. He's very loyal to his wife, Peggy, and it is in Cancer. He's not the most emotional guy. He's actually afraid of emotions and things like that. So I don't think this moon is a very good fit, but his sun, you could argue that. Probably not the best option, maybe, but he does get hot headed and he does go back to his like cool, calm self pretty easy, but it's funny. I love that show actually. Let's look at his ascendant. He's a Pisces ascendant, which I don't think makes any sense at all. They're like the spiritual going for like social justice and maybe even struggling with substance abuse. He does drink beer, but he does limit himself, it sounds like. He only has a six pack at a time. Instead of like my redneck family, they drink a case beer at a time and they drink until they pass out and throw up all over themselves. I don't think he's very Piscean at all. He's very rigid and very cold. not really cold, I guess he is. He's not very emotive. He doesn't express his emotions very well. So I don't think this Pisces ascendant is very fitting either. All right, let's go look at his Mercury. It is in Aries on the cusp of Pisces. Just crossed over the first house, going into second. So he's another cusp on his Mercury there. So I think that would say that he's very blunt, very direct, which he can be. Very kind of like hot headed and argumentative. He can be at times, but I think he usually tries to find peace. If there's an argument or there's something that he goes against, he isn't afraid to stand up for what he believes in, even though how strict, rigid, and traditional it may be. And he goes and asserts himself. I would say he's extroverted, but he's not overly top extroverted. He does like to socialize. He doesn't really see him alone very often. I guess he's alone working in his garage and stuff, doing his projects, but probably not the best Mercury fitting for him. But yeah, I think you can maybe argue that. And right here he has his Venus, which is in retrograde. So that would mean it's more internal, and it's in the second house in Aries. So he would probably be attracted to really hot-headed women. And Peggy, she's a bit of a narcissist. She's a bit of a firecracker at times. She's outrageous and very self-centered. And he also has his descendant here in Virgo, which I don't see Peggy is very Virgonian. In a way, she was a substitute Spanish teacher, and Mercury is ruled by, or Venus. Virgo is ruled by Mercury that we were just talking about, and that does represent languages. And she's a teacher, so maybe he is attracted to the educators. Eventually, she became like a news reporter and a real estate agent, which Mercury is also about mercantile. Hence, mercantile comes from Mercury. It's very mercurial. And yeah, it's also more Gemini rather than Virgo, I would say. But she was a news reporter for the local paper there. But this would say he has low self esteem about, okay, never mind. It's in the first house, not the second house. Maybe there's some struggle with love for himself. Maybe that would probably be a pretty narcissistic view as well, but it's more internal. So maybe that would be like a sign of a covert narcissist since it's retrograde. When planets go retrograde, just to explain, normally they're moving forward like this, but at the time Hank Hill was apparently born, according to the TV show, it was going retrograde. So if we were looking at the sky and watching Venus in the sky, instead of it going forward, it appeared to be going backwards just because of the ecliptic and the orbits and stuff that's going on between us here on Earth and Venus. Yeah, so I think this would be more like an internal love. Maybe he'd be a bit narcissistic. I think this would indicate that. I don't think he's narcissistic, but he's maybe attracted to narcissistic women. Let's go look at his Mars. Mars is in Taurus in the second house, and it's conjunct Jupiter there, which is actually teetering in the third house in Taurus. So I would say Mars usually makes you pretty impulsive, but it is in Taurus, but Taurus is in its own house, what's it's associated with. So it's about money. Like I have my second house Mars, and at one point I was very impulsive with spending. I'm a lot better now, but when I was younger, I would just overdraft my bank account on purpose just to go do stupid stuff, and I was very bad with money. I think making a conjunction with Jupiter would probably accentuate those kind of factors and make him even more impulsive, but he's very strict with his money. It seems like he works really hard. I don't know, it's just a cartoon and a TV show, but it seems like they can just get up and go to Japan so their dad can go meet his ex-lover over there, and they always seem to have plenty of money. But again, it's a TV show and it's not written perfectly. We got to keep in mind this is fictional. It can also make you very hot-headed again about your self-worth and stuff. Maybe he's real sensitive if someone makes fun of him. And again, that's aggrandized here because it's making a conjunction with Jupiter. But I don't think that Mars would be very fitting for him. But we'll look right here at Jupiter since that's next in line and is making conjunction. So again, that would probably indicate that he has a lot of money, but he's very impulsive with the money at the same time. Or maybe he earns his money through fighting or war. I know he did want to go into the military, like I said, because of his narrow urethra. And Cotton was in the military, obviously, where he killed fit him in. But yeah, this would probably indicate that he has a lot of resources, a lot of natural resources. He makes his money through propane, which is a natural gas, and Taurus is about nature and everything that's organic and animals and things like that. They're going to revive the show. I can't wait for it. Actually, I love this show. And his boss is Buck Strickland, and he was this alcoholic who had multiple heart attacks. So maybe they'll reboot it where Hank owns a company now and he's making a lot more money. So who knows? Maybe this kind of does make a little sense. All right, let's go find his Saturn over here, which we already talked about a little bit. That is conjunct Neptune in the 8th house in Libra. So this would indicate that he probably has some kind of restriction with love and intimacy and sex, which he does. He's very, anything emotional or sexual or intimate, he's very uncomfortable with. So that kind of does make sense. Like I said, it's a retrograde too. They're both retrograde, so they're going in reverse. But Libra, it's about laws and fairness and stuff like that. I think he's a very fair guy overall. He does get a little full of himself and kind of gets a little competitive at times when things aren't in his little paradigm, which are the herd state kind of mentality. He's definitely located in the herd state. But this would indicate someone who is very probably concerned with social justice, with different relationships and fairness for everybody. So I could see this kind of, maybe not so much with the Saturn being there, but with the Neptune being there, like a social justice warrior type of energy. It's all for all the sex and all the taboo and all the strange, weird things that we consider. So maybe someone who's like a gay supporter or the trans supporter or something like that, which they cracked a lot of transgender jokes in that show early on. It slowed down towards the end, but it was kind of the transition where things were the way they used to be and the way that things are now. The show was canceled in 2010, so that was when it was really starting to take off with that kind of stuff. So it'd be interesting to see the reboot and see how they handle that situation. Talked a bit about his Uranus. It is in Cancer, so that would probably somebody who has wild mood swings, especially since it is near his moon. Someone who's probably really impulsive, probably who has a lot of flings and a lot of romance and a lot of things like that. A lot of love affairs, but I guess, like I said, he is very loyal to his wife Peggy and very uncomfortable with sex. And it sounds like they very rarely have sex themselves. So I think somebody that really is spontaneous and really needs a variety and, like I said, probably promiscuous in nature, who has a lot of wild mood swings. Like I said, he can get moody and he can get angry when things don't go his way, when things are, he's very rigid, but overall, I think he's pretty calm and he doesn't like stimulation as far as like variety and things like that. So not very fitting. All right. We already talked enough about Neptune, I think. So we're going to go here to Pluto. So Pluto and Leo generation. So he's a baby boomer, like late baby boomer going into Gen Z maybe, but more of a baby boomer. It is in the 6th house. So extremes when it comes to being in service to others, extreme when developing skills, trauma around developing skills. Maybe he doesn't feel worthy helping others, maybe a lot of extreme medical issues, extreme mental illness, things like that. Could be an autistic thing. I know his son Bobby, who's an ENFP, that boy ain't right, I'll tell you what. Maybe. Yeah. So, it's in Leo, so it's about theatrics and things like that. Having a 6th house cusp right there in Leo, we would have to look at his son. So he would probably be about performance and dance, or maybe developing leadership in the military or some kind of service, or being some kind of doctor, or maybe like a psychiatrist. Yeah, it's also in retrograde too. So learning skills around psychology, learning skills around sexuality and things of that nature, and making it very public. But it is retrograde, so maybe that is something that he keeps down and hidden and things like that. So probably not very fitting. I'm definitely going to create his birth chart the way I think it would be more applicable to Hank Hill and make him a little more mundane and a little grounded and a little more ESTJ like. But there's a few that kind of ring true and there's others that aren't. So let's look at his wound. So it would be in the 11th house in Capricorn. So I know one time in one episode, he was like a football star in his high school when he got into state, but he ended up hurting his ankle. And some of the footage showed him like showboating, dancing like an Egyptian, doing flips and stuff after he scored a touchdown. And he ended up hurting himself, and it humbled him. And after that, he never wanted to express himself in a gleeful way. And he felt shame when people were showboating. That's why he's so strict on Bobby. When Bobby he's an ENFP and he has aspirations to be a comedian and a chef and things like that. The reboot, he's actually going to come back as a chef from what I read. But at that moment where he was showboating, then he thought God was punishing him for showboating, and he hurt his ankle and they lost state in the football competition. So the 11th house here is about your peers, your community, things like that. Normally having Chiron there would indicate that you were made fun of. Maybe you were bullied in school or at work, or you were just this outcast and never fit in. And that kind of caused you to coil up and be shy and reserved, and you're different and you're ashamed of being different. And Capricorn, that's more about traditional things, being hard, being stern. So he kind of learned a hard lesson by showboating, just didn't like to emote emotions and things like that, which probably not as very indicative of his moon and Uranus there, but it is making an opposition. So maybe he was like that. Maybe he was kind of wild and things like that when he was a little younger. Again, it's not consistent writing. As a teenager, showed him like he pulled a prank on the groundskeeper that took care of the football field and mowed the field before he could. And that was his idea of shenanigans. So doesn't sound very indicative of moon conjunct Uranus in the fifth house in Cancer. But yeah, this Chiron does fit, but we'll look at aspects a little bit later. Let's look at his node. Let's do a nodal analysis of him. So his south node is in Leo in the sixth house. So he kind of has tendencies to showboat, tendencies to maybe he's basically indicate like someone who's a doctor and they're super arrogant about it. Oh, I got all the skills, I got all these credentials, I got this, I got that, and I'm better than you. Those would be tendencies like where he thinks he's better than everybody. And in the way he does, like he's a propane salesman and stuff like that, but he's kind of not very arrogant about it. He's just very anything, and probably the opposite. Maybe his north node would be in there, but I don't think that would be very fitting of him because he doesn't really go back. Because this is like what Elon Musk has. Elon Musk has his south node over here in the first house, and he's always showing himself off. Here he'd be showing his skills off, but I guess he's very proud about this is also day-to-day routines. He's very proud about his lawn, how he mows his lawn and keeps it immaculate, and his mower and things like that, and maintenance on his house. So yeah, I could maybe see that as he likes to show it off to the world. I know one episode he was on the parade of homes and things like that. So maybe you could argue that. But let's look at the ruler. It is the sun here. It's between the first and house. I think it is actually in the first house. I got right here 28 degrees. The cusp of it starts. Doesn't tell where the cusp starts. That's annoying. Yeah. So we're going to count it as the first house, I think. So he'd be very full of himself. He'd be very arrogant kind of a ways, but it is bleeding over into Taurus. I said there's a lot of theories of so there's several theories about like when planets are on cusp and stuff. Stephen Forrest says if it's in the sign, it's actually in the sign, but if it's in the house and it's within a degree and a half of the house, which I think it is, we would throw it in a second house. However, people give planets orbs for when they're making conjunctions and aspects of things like this. Like you look at this as a 9-degree orb, and since it's the sun, most people would count that as a conjunction. So again, having Venus there, he would be about beauty and aesthetics and things like that. Especially with Aries, it'd be about himself because it's about very individualistic and selfish in a way. So I think he'd be narcissistic and obsessed with his looks. But then again, it is retrograde, so maybe it's like an internal covert narcissist sort of thing, which I don't think fits him very well. But this would indicate tendencies like that, where he's very vain, he's very adamant about his skills and showing his skills off to the world and things like that. He's not a big showboat, so I don't think that's very fitting of it. But it's also making an opposition over here to this Saturn Neptune thing where he's very insecure about his intimacy. So it's also about very control. So maybe he's trying to control the situation about how he's uncomfortable with sex and uncomfortable with intimacy, and he has control the situation, and it would bleed out where he's like the teacher, he's a mentor and things like that. Yeah, I don't really think that's very fitting of him. I'm trying to see how this correlate with him. I'm sure they weren't thinking of his birth chart and astrology when they were doing the show. They probably just gave him a random birthday. What else is the south node is also conjunct Mercury, or making a trine to Mercury, I should say. So again, probably it's in the second house, or it's in Aries in the first house. It'd be about talking himself up. So this would make sense for someone who likes to talk to himself a big game, like, oh, I'm this great, I'm this great, I'm this good at this, I'm good at this because I'm learning, I'm good at this skill, I'm good at that skill. So a guy at work, an ENTP guy who's like that, he has like 3 jobs and he goes to school full time and he thinks everybody has to go to him for all of his problems and he thinks he can do whatever he want. He might actually have this combination. Oh, I'm going to school to get this education and you have to rely on me, and I gloat about this. I'm so good at that, and I can solve all your problems. Come to me, that sort of thing. So I don't think that really fits a Hank Rutherford Hill. Let's see, what else is this making an aspect to? It's too far away from Pluto. So yeah, it's about a 12-degree orb. I don't think we'll count that. It is making a loose square to his sun, which would be making another loose square to that. So there would be some kind of authority over him. He did have a very rough childhood with his dad. His dad was a World War II veteran who lost his shins in Cotton Hill. Probably my favorite fictional character of all time, possibly. I love Cotton Hill. So he would have, what's your son there making a square to your nose, even though it is a loose square. It's 28 and 20, so it's about an 8-degree orb, which I would count. So there was some kind of authority figure over him. In my chart, I had the same thing. My south node's over here in Sagittarius in the second, and it's conjunct Mars, and it's making a square. I believe I was my grandpa, who was a lot like Cotton Hill, actually. He was a World War II and a Korean veteran, and he became a mercenary and was a very evil guy. And I think I was reborn as him, possibly. My nodal story kind of strongly indicates something along the lines of that. And I got a rough life this go around, so I think I'm paying for all the stuff I did in that life and possibly others too. But this could indicate his father, because the sun does represent masculine energy and often the father. So maybe this is like his dad kind of was hard on him. And I guess we'll see where he's going with his north node. So a north node in the 12th house in Aquarius. So I think this would indicate that you need to explore various paths of spirituality, various religions, which he doesn't do. He's Lutheran, Protestant, Christian. So he's the status quo American, Southwest Texan guy that goes to church and loves his family and goes to work and watches football on weekends. He would need some kind of variety. This is Aquarius is weird. It's very individualistic. Again, kind of Aries down here. It's very individualistic, but it's more like I got to be different from everybody and be defiant about it and just step on everybody's toes because I don't like the status quo. This is kind of like I need to be the best and I need to have all the admiration on me. Leo's similar that way. I have to be in charge. I have to show my ass to the world in a pompous, regal like way. So he would need to explore spiritual paths. He would need to explore different avenues of spirituality and things like that, working in like maybe like a prison or a hospital or something like that, or working towards social justice, making group collaboration with people. This is this selfish, narcissistic energy. And this is, I got to go and brainstorm with other people. I keep them at arm's length. I don't get really close. I'm not buddy with them, but I have this 11th house community, which he has this wound in, apparently, according to somebody with this chart, which I don't think fits Hank very well. I think he does have some points where it does fit him. But overall, this isn't Hank Hill's chart. I want to create another one after this that's more fitting of his chart. We could actually use this same program. I got this from astroseek.com, and they have a custom chart generator. But the ruler we would look at this is the modern ruler is Aquarius, and the traditional ruler is Saturn, which I can't make any sense out of. So I'm just going to use the modern ruler in the 5th house. So this would give some more indication where he needs to go. So he needs to have these wild emotions and kind of embrace these wild emotions, mood swings that he would have if this was him. He would be very emotional with conjunct with the sun or the moon, and in Cancer and in the 5th house. So exploring flings and romance and exploring different hobbies and trying a lot of different things and seeing what sticks. I think that would be the thing he would need to do. So he's very stuck and rigid with the skills that he does have. So he would have to go and explore new skills and explore new spirituality and different types of social justice and things like that, and different people and group cohesion. Let's all get along. This is kind of like the 12th house is associated with Neptune and Pisces, and it's about finding fairness for everybody, finding, like rights for the gays, rights for the trans, rights for blacks, whatever, and that sort of thing. And he would need to be a proponent for that sort of thing, and it had to be like emotionally fulfilling, and he'd have to explore his sexuality and his spirituality, which I don't see Hank doing at all. But let's explore a couple more. His Chiron's interesting. I think that is one of the things that did fit in a way and is making a square to this Saturn Neptune conjunction. So something happened in a group dynamic where he is afraid to be intimate. He's afraid, he has fear of sexuality and intimacy and spirituality. Something shunned him. Maybe he was kind of like Bobby when he was younger, or something like the class clown, but in a small town in Texas, that doesn't really fly very well, especially back when Hank would have been a kid in the 60s and 70s. So that created some kind of scar for him. So maybe that's why he became so rigid and afraid to express his intimacy and express his emotions, and afraid to express his spirituality. That's also making a down here to Mars and the sun. So the experiences that he would take from being the outcast in a group, where he learned a hard lesson, and he developed fear around being in groups and expressing his individuality, and things like that would work in his favor in a way, or maybe it would work in his favor too much and he wouldn't control it and would blow up in his face. And again, this is about having large finances, or maybe being super impulsive about money and losing. Maybe he gains a lot of money, he takes these risks, he takes these gambles, he's very frugal and very calculated and not very impulsive at all. He's very deliberate with his actions. So this doesn't really fit again, but maybe they developed a scar. So maybe they feel they need to get a lot of money. Maybe they feel they need to become rich because it's Taurus and second house energy. So it's both. But maybe he's, oh, maybe if I spend all this money and I look like a big spender, which would make sense with this Leo South node. Look at me with all this money I have. I get it from my job as a public servant or a doctor, and I know all these skills and I got all these degrees and things like that. And I'm big spender, and look at me, I'm flashy and things like that. And that's how he would overcompensate for his chironic wound. And look at this, the Chiron, it's making a square to the Saturn Neptune, like I said, and it's also making a square down to his, and this is making opposition one each other. That is very terrible. So you got the Chiron here, you got the sun down here, and you got Neptune and Saturn up here. So square from his Chiron to the Saturn Neptune, and this is making an opposition to all this over here. So this would create a great point of friction. Got wounded in a group dynamic. So maybe he overcompensates with his ego. He overcompensates with who he is and tries to be the big narcissistic shot and flaunts his money, and he flaunts everything else, and flaunts his skills and his status, his position in work and things like that. Because that's sixth house too. And it's making an opposition like, no, you can't be intimate, you can't be sexual, you can't be spiritual, you got to believe this, you got to believe in God, you got to believe in Christianity and things like that. So that would be a big energy for him if this was his chart and he was a real person and this was actually accurate. Let's give more context to where his north node was. So it's making a quincunx to the moon and the ruler. So there's some frictional aspect between where he needs to go and him expressing his emotions, or him having loving, intimate relationships, maybe with flings and groups of people rather than having a monogamous relationship, expressing his emotions very wildly and openly, as creating that, which would probably be with this chironic wound, which is too far away to be a conjunction, in my opinion. Like I said, it's making a square to his sun. It looks like it's all the aspects his north node is making. Again, he'd be a very vain person, very narcissistic. Look at me. This is my money. I'm really good looking. I'm rich. I'm successful, which isn't Hank Hill at all. We talked about that. So again, he would probably be very verbal about his emotions, very, because it's about Aries. He probably just very impulsive of what he says. And when he feels an emotion, he just blurts it out. And it's very wild and very aggressive and very violent, which he does have a temper, but he controls it for the most part. And I don't think that is very fitting. This is also making a quincunx to his Sagittarian midheaven. So this would indicate someone who likes to travel, maybe for work, maybe someone who works in like a college or some higher education, or as a travel agent, or maybe some kind of clergy or something like that. And this is like a frictional aspect that's not going very well. So wild mood swings, flings, probably multiple sexual partners, a variety of sexual partners, having a high sexual appetite going towards this. So maybe it indicates something like a traveling sex worker who finds emotional fulfillment traveling around having sex with people, or maybe he's a traveling minister. It could be about kids too, house of kids. So maybe house of children. So maybe having a lot of children, or helping a variety of children, being emotionally fulfilled with helping kids, or being a father and traveling, going overseas, like a pastor overseas or something like that, who goes and converts people like in Africa and starts missions, things like that. But he's not very adventurous. He likes to stay home. He is very satisfied being a propane salesman or an assistant manager at Strickland Propane. Again, a lot of stuff going to his north node ruler Uranus in the fifth house, and his moon Pisces. So again, being very spiritual, being very open, maybe even like mental illness. This would indicate a lot of mood swings and maybe being bipolar or something like that, going from one high to a low and expressing that very emotionally. So probably not very fitting again. It's also making a sextile to his sun there. So being like a spiritual warrior, since that is an Aries, and he's definitely not a spiritual warrior. He's just this humble man who goes to church on Sundays and gets drunk and watches football afterwards. So I don't think this is very indicative of Hank at all. Let me know in the comments what you think, and I would appreciate if you like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.